Man, I can't believe the number of languages I can speak. It's just crazy. Just credit to God. I got to tell you, credit to God. All right. For the past several weeks, we have been examining some of life's difficult questions. Does God really exist? Where did God come from? Is the Bible reliable? Why does God allow suffering? How can Jesus claim to be the only way to God? And there were some others as well. You can watch any one of them on our YouTube channel, or as some asked this morning in the first service, if you would like a manuscript copy that has the quotes and the statistics and stuff in it, write down on that yellow card your email address and turn it in, or call the office and request a copy of the manuscript. Today's message is entitled, Can a Christian Believe in Evolution? The common consensus amongst secularists, and that in my world that's another word for unbelievers, is that there is a long-standing war between science and Christianity. That tension has been fueled by articles such as this one, Science Must Destroy Religion by Sam Harris. Book titles like God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens. The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. Time magazine clearly revealed where it stands when it said Charles Darwin didn't want to murder God, as he once put it, but he did. For several decades, the American public has largely been deceived into thinking that science and faith cannot coexist, and that every rational human being needs to select science over faith. Now, those of us who grew up attending church and Sunday school were taught during that time from the Bible that the universe and all of life, including human beings, was a creation of the divine creator, Jehovah God. At the same time, we were taught in public school that the theory of evolution was scientific fact, explaining the origin of the universe and all of life. And I don't know about you, but that creates stress for most believers as we try to reconcile what we are hearing into a rational, reasonable resolution between these two sides. Now, let me be upfront about my bias this morning. One of our core values at New Hope is this: ultimate truth. And if you look on our website, it says, we believe that God is the ruler and creator of all things, the source of absolute truth as revealed through reading and study of His Word, the Bible. The biblical worldview considers all truth to ultimately be God's truth. Modern science is really a relative infant on the scene of human intellectual history, really not making an appearance until the mid-1600s. And many of those first and great scientists were Christians. Men like Johann Kepler, Blaise Pascal, Robert Boyle, Isaac Newton, just to name a few. And in the centuries since then, Christians have oftentimes continued to make tremendous scientific discoveries. And then along comes Charles Darwin. And he writes The Origin of Species, published in November of 1859. It has been regarded as a Bible by secularists who need an explanation apart from God for the origins of the universe and the existence of life. But in his book entitled The Case for Faith, Lee Strobel says, and I quote, more and more biologists, biochemists, other researchers, not just Christians, have raised serious objections to the theory of evolution in recent years. This is not a case, he said, or a battle between religion and science. This is an issue of science versus science. In other words, this is a pursuit of provable facts over hilarious hypotheses, of timeless truths over fanciful theories. So if you take out your outline there, I want to look first of all just with some definitions. You don't have to write down anything here. In its very simplest form, the word evolve is a verb that means to develop gradually. As a noun, the word evolution has come to mean the theory that all life originated from non-living material and developed by natural selection and mutation without purpose or design over billions of years. Now, most people, including many of us Christians, would agree that there are small variations, there are small changes that occur within species of animals and plants as they adapt into their environments, and that's called microevolution. But Darwin's theory goes far beyond microevolution. It goes far beyond small variations or changes within a species of plants and animals. Darwin theorizes that over a long period of time, an entirely new, an entirely different species actually evolves from the previous species. And this is called macroevolution. Macroevolution teaches that given enough time, human beings came from apes, birds came from dinosaurs, and the list goes on. Now you need to know there is widespread disagreement amongst people with regards to belief in this macroevolution. And it's not just a disagreement between faith and science, it's actually disagreements that occur within science itself over a lot of these things that we're going to look at. The very first verse in the Bible speaks of God's creative process. In the beginning, God. No explanation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The psalmist affirmed this truth. The Lord merely spoke, and the heavens were created. He breathed the word, and all the stars were born. For when God spoke, the world began. The world appeared at God's command. For most of its history, the church has believed that God created everything which exists out of nothing. The idea that non-living and living things came into existence by themselves and developed on their own would have seemed far-fetched, would have seemed unfathomable for centuries. In the year 325 AD, and then later affirmed in 381 AD, the Nicene Creed, the church affirmed in that document, and I quote, "We believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible." Darwin's theory of evolution presented those people who were devoid of God what seemed like a plausible explanation for the existence of the universe and life. And over the years, by standing firm in the Bible's account of creation, the church increasingly came under attack for defending the authority and the truthfulness of Scripture. So much so that eventually, even many people within the church began to embrace evolution in one form or another. Like many of you, I remember growing up, trying to merge, if you will, what I was learning at church on Sunday with what I was learning Monday through Friday at school. And that's why there are many in the church who have embraced various parts of evolution. There are those who give God credit for using evolution in every aspect of our creation. Others say, well, God created the universe first, and then God oversaw the evolutionary process that resulted in the formation of life. Still others in the church reason that since the Bible says that one day is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years is as one day, that these 6 days of creation that we read about in Genesis chapter 1 might in fact be longer than 24-hour period of time. Paul warned us in Romans chapter 12 and verse 2 that we need to be careful because we live in a world that wants to squeeze us and wants to mold us into its form. We live in a world that wants to force us to believe what it believes. And yet, the more we study about both science and faith, the more it becomes obvious to me anyway, evolution had little, if anything, to do with how the universe, how first life, and how human life came into existence. Now, we don't have time this morning to look at all of to go real deep. What my goal here this morning is to simply whet your appetite of curiosity so that you will feel the desire to go this week and look into this topic more deeply. So I want to look at determining our origins and how we came into existence. In his book entitled When Skeptics Ask, Norman Geisler says that in solving a crime, a forensic scientist must understand that every event and every object has a natural cause or an intelligent cause. So you hear that? They have to look at every piece of evidence, every event, and ask themselves, is this a natural cause or is this an intelligent cause? For example, in their minds, crystals are repeatedly formed by natural causes. Makes sense. But crystal chandeliers have an intelligent cause, right? Waterfalls can be explained by natural causes. But hydroelectric plants must have an intelligent cause. Wind erosion can be explained with natural causes. But windmills require an intelligent cause. The Grand Canyon requires natural causes, even though we know that natural is God who is forming it. But the faces on Mount Rushmore require an intelligent cause. If a geologist just goes into a river and finds a round stone, a geologist can assume that it was as a result of a natural cause. But if the geologist finds an arrowhead there in the stream, then the geologist assumes it's coming from an intelligent cause. And so even as they use these principles to solve crimes, we can use these principles to solve the question of origins, which we're going to do. Is the origin of the universe, the origin of first life, and the origin of human life best explained as having a natural cause or an intelligent cause? All right, let's look at these. The first is the origin of the universe. One of the problems for macroevolutionists is the belief that nothing produced something. We're supposed to believe that given enough time and just the right conditions, something could come from nothing. Now, folks, I loved math when I was growing up. I still love math. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of doubt, with absolute certainty, that 0 plus 0 equals 0. Pretty tough stuff, is it not? I can go one step farther and tell you that 0 times 0 equals 0. And I will say to you that no matter how many college degrees some intelligent scientist may possess, they can never prove that something comes from nothing. When science got to the point here not all that long ago and concluded that our universe is continually expanding, even atheist scientists were forced to admit that the universe had a beginning. The English atheist astronomer Fred Hoyle was the first to call this new theory the Big Bang. You've heard of that. Now, in fact, Hoyle used that term, the Big Bang, in derision. He didn't agree with it, and he was concerned that if science accepted this, embraced the concept, they'd be in trouble. Instead of eliminating God, scientists proved the need for God because there had to be a beginning. The Big Bang. Let's just suppose for a moment that we're together, and while we're together, boom! And you look at me and you go, where did that Big Bang come from? And I go, nothing. Wouldn't you think I was a little dumb? I mean, the obvious is, we heard a Big Bang. And you're telling me it came from nothing? Accepting that universe came to existence with a Big Bang theory honestly caused division even amongst scientists, even amongst atheist scientists. David Hume was an ardent British skeptic, and Hume wrote, and I quote, "I never heard so absurd a proposition as that a thing could arise without a cause. It can't. And this cause had to have been supernatural, since it was the cause of the whole natural world." It doesn't take a scientist to realize their Big Bang theory closely resembles the biblical doctrine of creation. And yet these highly intelligent atheist scientists stubbornly insist that something came from nothing. And for some reason they look at us as though we're committing intellectual suicide because we don't believe that. The author of Hebrews assures us, by faith, we understand the entire universe was formed at God's command. That what we now see didn't come from anything that was already seen. The Apostle Paul affirmed that God made the world and everything in it, and Abraham believed that God created everything from nothing. And so do the sons and daughters of Abraham. Now, furthermore, I mentioned last week, just briefly, evolution has no logical explanation for all of the precise factors that are needed for human life to exist. Some have estimated there are over 150 factors that have to be precisely met for there to be life, human life on planet Earth. For instance, Earth's air contains 21% oxygen, the exact amount needed for human life. Not 15%, not 35%, 21% oxygen. Earth's gravitational force, the thickness of Earth's crust, the distance of the sun from the Earth, the tilt of the Earth, and more are all precisely what is needed for human life to exist on planet Earth. Even the position and the size of Jupiter serve as a protection to our planet. Mathematician Roger Penrose calculates the chances of all of these factors, 150 or however many they are, of all of them coming together at just the right moment for there to be human life is 1 in 10 to 123. In other words, it ain't going to happen. In the words of that famous theologian Lloyd Christmas, portrayed by Jim Kerry when he learned the odds of he and Mary starting a relationship to be 1 in a million. So you're telling me there's a chance, right? There's a reason the name of the movie was Dumb and Dumber, right? Again, listen, the chances of all of those variables needed for human life to be exactly at where they need to be is 1 part in 10 to 123 zeros behind it. Physicist Michael G. Strauss concludes, and I quote, "The universe looks finely tuned for life because it is. It seems reasonable that a universe which looks divinely designed really is divinely designed." Now, listen to the words of the author of Proverbs. "By wisdom, the Lord founded the earth. By understanding, he created the heavens." God made the universe. God made the earth exactly the way God needed to make it because God knew exactly the conditions that were needed for human beings to survive on planet Earth. Now, there was a time many years ago when it seemed to make sense to me that these days described in Genesis chapter 1 must be longer than 24 hours. I mean, I'm trying to marry this evolutionary model with the Bible's account of creation, and that seemed to be the logical thing to do. But the Hebrew word for day is yom, Y-O-M. And like our English word Yom can refer to a literal 24-hour day, or it can refer to a longer period of time. For example, we might say it was a day of reckoning. Now, that could mean it was a 24-hour period of reckoning, right? Or it could mean it was a long period. It was a week. It was a longer period of time, day of reckoning. However, in the Hebrew language, if a number accompanies this word yom, it always means, always, one day, one literal 24-hour day. There aren't any exceptions here in the Hebrew language. In the creation account, Yom is associated with day 1, day 2, day 3, etc. Moses is very clear when he says 6 times there was evening and there was morning. And honestly, if we took the time to think through the ramifications of every day in Genesis 1 being much longer period of time, it just doesn't compute. Let me give you a couple examples. Plants were created on day 3. Insects were created on day 5. The reality is many plants will not survive if they're not pollinated by insects. Well, how does that work if the plants aren't pollinated for 1,000 years? Well, they'll die. After 6 days of creation, God rested on the 7th day. Did God need to rest? No, he didn't need to rest. So why did he rest? As a holy example for you and I, so that we would rest on the 7th day. God didn't need to create anything through the use of evolution. I mean, think about that. So if we have a Sabbath day of rest, hey, Kerry, it's time to get up. You got to go to work. I said, no way, Jane. I got 999 more years before I got to get up and go to work, man. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't work apart from 24 hours. All right, let me look at the origin of first life. Again, listen, there's only 2 possibilities here. Either life somehow emerged from non-life through natural processes alone, or there was an intelligent life involved. In his book entitled Darwin's Black Box, Michael Behe writes, and I quote, "No one at Harvard University, at the National Institutes of Health, at the National Academy of Sciences, and no Nobel Prize winner has ever proven or even been able to explain how life could come from no life through Darwinian processes. Hasn't been done." The famous evolutionist Richard Dawkins once said, "There is enough genetic information in a single-cell organism like an amoeba to fill 1,000 books of an encyclopedia." 1,000 books. What's the likelihood of just the right chemicals coming together at just the right time to create this single-cell organism that is filled with enough information for 1,000 books? What's the likelihood? Well, British astrophysicist Fred Hoyle once compared the likelihood of first life, all of these things happening, random chemicals coming together, he compared it as being, quote now, equivalent to the possibility that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the materials in the junkyard. So, you're telling me there's a chance? Not much. Richard Dawkins publicly questioned how anyone who is learned in science could possibly believe in God. My question is, how could anyone who is learned in science not believe in God? And then thirdly, the origin of human life. We have a lot of murals around Marshalltown. I tell you what, I look at these things and go, whoa, I can't draw a stick figure, let alone something that beautiful. No, you know, or trains. How many times you've seen the train cars and they've got things written on them or pictures painted on them? Or on trees, there's somebody carves in there, Jane loves Kerry, something like that. Or at camp, oh my goodness, there's a lot of people that would write on the ceiling or on the wall, let the succeeding generations know that they had been here at church camp before them, et cetera, et cetera. Now, even if we don't see the mural being painted, even if we don't see somebody writing the message, have we ever looked at a message like that and assumed it just randomly appeared there by chance? Of course not. In my study, I read that each cell in the human body contains more information than all 30 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. One cell in the human body. Atheist Carl Sagan calculated that the DNA information in the human brain was equal to 20 million books. You and I literally have libraries, I mean plural, of information between our ears. So the question for macro evolutionists is, how did we get from an amoeba to Adam? How did we get from goo to you? Through the zoo. The answer is evolutionists give its mutations and natural selections over an unfathomable amount of time, and somehow it's going to result in major changes. You need to understand, natural selection helps present organisms survive, but it never helps new organisms arrive. Just look it up. Natural selection does not produce more complex organisms any more than dropping red, white, and blue confetti from an airplane 100 feet above the ground is going to result in that confetti falling to the ground 100 feet below and forming the American flag. And no amount of time is going to change that. We could take that red, white, and blue confetti higher up, drop it from the plane, give it more time, and it's still not going to create an American flag on the bottom, on the ground. It's not going to happen. And likewise, we can give natural selection all the time we want, and it's not going to change one species of plant or animal into another. It's not going to happen. Charles Darwin admitted the greatest argument against his theory of evolutionary change was the lack of fossils supporting the notion that species gradually change over long periods of time. And Darwin said he was confident that succeeding generations would find these missing links. But in the generation since, the missing links have not been found. It's not gonna happen. And even if, just work with me, even if random chance somehow explain the existence of a human body and how it works, how do humans evolve? How did they evolve with consciousness? How did we evolve with intelligence? How did we evolve with the ability to reason and speak? How do we explain our innate concepts of right and wrong? How could we possibly have any moral values apart from God? Our choice is clear. Either everything came into existence without God, or everything came into existence because of God. One choice involves boatloads of faith that rarely makes sense, and the other choice requires a faith that is continually, intelligently, and rationally, constantly being confirmed. I love what the nuclear physicist Hugh Siefkin says, and I quote, "My faith can be summed up in this one paradox. I believe in science and I believe in God." Do we have to give up science? Do we have to give up reason in order to believe in God? No, absolutely not. We don't have to give up God to believe in science. James Tour, a Christian scientist, he's on the cutting edge of molecular theory, says, and I quote, "I stand in awe of God because of what he has done through his creation. Only a rookie who knows nothing about science would say science takes away from faith. If you really study science, it will bring you closer to God. And I would argue that if you draw closer to God, you will find yourself appreciating science that much more. Time magazine got it wrong. Darwin didn't murder God. Darwin just couldn't read God's writing. So, Jane's younger sister, Krista, and her husband, Brad, are here. Last night, I don't know if you got out to go outside last night, but man, there was meteor showers, and oh, it's beautiful. Did anybody take it in? Oh, so we're sitting on our back deck and just looking up in the night sky and watching all of these stars and seeing all of these meteors coming into the atmosphere. And the verse that kept coming to me was Psalm 8. When I look at the night sky, when I see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you set in place, who are we? Who are we that you should think about us? Who are we that you would care for us? If God created you and I, and if God loved us enough to pay the penalty for our sin through Christ's sacrifice on the cross, then listen, you and I owe him our lives. Does he have yours? If not, what's it going to take? When will he? Let's pray. Oh God, I can't even fathom your patience. I can't fathom your truth. I mean, we come to it, we believe your truth, it sets us free. Free from the lies the evil one tells us. Free from the lies of this world. And God, I know that not a single person here has evolved from an ape. Every person here was created in your divine image. And you have a plan. You have a purpose for each and every one of us. And I know that we can only find that plan and that purpose in you and you alone. So thank you for calling us here together today. Thank you for your word. It is so powerful. I'm just amazed at what you do in us. And I pray, God, this week we would be amazed at what you do through us. Armed with your truth that we could share with others who are searching as well. We commit our lives this day. We commit our lives this week to you in Jesus' name for his sake, to his glory. Amen. So, we need to